Just, I'm not going to say much because I want to leave it to the main attraction here. But Sarah and I would like to thank all of the people that are here today, not only members of the church, but the leadership team that's been here. If you're a member of this, the S&F team, or the church council, or the endowment team, would you please stand a second? Thanks to these folks who helped put all this thing together. So don't applaud, it'll give them the big head. Please don't do that. Anyway, so without further ado, I will say one thing. Somebody prior to us had the vision of doing this. And Sam, if I'm going to say this like you said yesterday, tell them what you said yesterday about feeding the pump or something. But you have to stand up here so they can hear you.
Right.
Mm-hmm. As we were talking in preparation for today's meeting, I made the comment that we need to remember that the endowment, which plays a role in running our operating budget, which is important to remember because it fills out our ability to do what we do each year. But it's not an infinite resource. And the reason we're meeting today and the reason we're engaging Jerry Henry is because if we want to continue to draw on the endowment, we have to replenish it. It's like trying to pour water out of a pitcher, eventually it's empty. So we need to put more water in it. The discussion you wanted me to.
Yeah, exactly. I thought you said that very well yesterday. Anyway, without most of you heard the introduction of Jerry, I wouldn't go any further because although I realized we were in high school at the same time. I graduated in 71 too. Oh, right. Yeah. And we both had hair. But anyway, so we're glad you're here, and so take it away, buddy.
Okay, thank you, Frank and Sarah, and thanks to all of you for being here. And I just realized I won't be able to see that. Maybe I'll remember what's on the slides here, but we can move. It's taped down a little bit, but that's okay. We have more. Does it? I see. There we go. Thank you. Maybe that'll work. That's right. This is my good side anyhow. So, well, I'm here to share with you the findings from that congregational survey that we sent out a few weeks ago, and I compiled and analyzed all of that. I'm not going to keep you here multiple hours. I just have a few slides. I tried to summarize things. We went through it yesterday with members of the Church Council, the Stewardship Finance Committee, and the Endowment Committee. So they've seen the real detail behind all of this. There's much more behind even the slides that I'll share with you today, and the church office will have a full copy of this if anybody who really wants to go into details, and I'm sure that Frank and some of the other church council members and committee members will be glad to go through that with you in detail. Where I wanted to start was just talking about endowments in general. And United is fortunate that you've already established an endowment. If you look across Christendom and here in the United States, very few congregations really have an endowment. So the question is, why do you even need one? Well, the best practices in resource development, how you have resources, whether it's a nonprofit organization or a church congregation, is that I always say they're typically like three legs of a stool. You need that annual, ongoing support to bolster and support and fund your operating expenses, keeping the lights on and the basics that are in your operating budget. You're going to have special needs that may come through some major gifts or a special campaign focus that are typically capital related. That's bricks and mortar for the most part. But I remind people too that capital just simply means dollars. There are capital expenses and capital campaigns that are purely endowment focused, for example. But in most people's minds, capital are special project needs. You've done that here in amazing ways. The elevator, your expansion, renovations here over the years. So you understand that well. The third component that's becoming more and more important for nonprofits is really that endowment portion, which is the fund that actually helps provide for sustainability into the future. And it helps for opportunities that may emerge that are outside of the annual operating budget. And so it's in some ways, some people see it as a cushion. Some people see it as insurance into the future. But other people, and particularly for churches, I like to say, this is a way for people now to ensure that their values, what they love, goes on in perpetuity into the future. And that's what I heard in the survey here. People really care about United, the ministries, and all that you stand for here at this church. And you want to ensure that future generations have that opportunity as well. And so that's one of the core reasons for an endowment. I'll go ahead and say it before you ask the question. Some groups got into real trouble depending too much on their endowments during let's say the Great Recession period, 08, 09, where they were depending on so much to come from their endowments into their operating budgets that when the market took a nosedive, those trailing months thereafter, they really suffered. And it took a while for them to recover and get back to that level. I don't want to get into too much financial discussion because, as you heard, I went to divinity school and not to the School of Management. So in any case, I just want to remind you about your own endowment. And as Frank has said, any of the committee members here will be glad to go in greater detail with you about this. It was actually created in 2012 to help underwrite partially your operating budget. There's some funds that come into that annually, and then to provide for special projects or needs, to be that opportunity fund for the future. And it goes back to an initial gift that you had in '83 that the church had been fortunate to receive, and then you've been receiving other gifts. It's divided into 7 funds. 3 funds have monies that go directly into operating expenses. That's a general endowment fund that has unrestricted ability, community engagement and youth ministry fund, and then thirdly is the music fund. The other 4 funds are really designated beyond those first 3, one for land use sustainability, one for desert faith ministry and outreach, the third for youth mission, immersion trips, and then you see the 4th there is for musical instrument maintenance and support. So those are all designated funds that are part of the larger endowment. As I've heard the committee, we've had several conversations over the last few months, talk about before, without the endowed funds that you had, the pandemic period would have been very different for United Church. You were very fortunate that the earnings that came from that endowment helped to supplement, go into your operations and into special needs. And here are the different things. I don't want to read through each of these, but compensation for staff, your scholarships for youth camps, retreats, choral scholars, the FebFest workshops, landscape maintenance planning, repair to the Steinway, upgrade of the HVAC, and you were able to supply all of the special needs for your outreach during the pandemic because of your endowment. So that's the way an endowment works. It spins off its earnings. It's a savings account, essentially, and the earnings of that is what goes to be spent according to the designation or the policies that have been put together by your endowment committee with the approval of the council. So here's how it works. The annual spending allowance of the United Endowment is 5% of the investment earnings, investment earnings. It doesn't dip into the corpus, into the main amount of money that you have. So just remember that. This is purely the earnings that come off of that. And just as I pointed to, with the ups and downs of the market, it changes as far as how much you actually see of those earnings. As of the end of February, your market value was just over $1.5 million in that endowment. And given those fluctuations, and this is what Sam was referencing about needing to continually be feeding that source of endowment, there are going to be fluctuations, and therefore you need to continue that support that goes into the endowment. And just remember, I always get this question too, endowment and endowment giving is not a replacement for annual stewardship giving. You still need that annual support to cover the budget that you put together, that your church council approves. Finance committee works hard with the stewardship folks, and you all put that together to support that. This is that over and above. It's that insurance policy. It's the extra, the opportunity fund, I often like to say too, that your church leadership can decide how to spend some of those unrestricted earnings that you have as well. Any comments from the church council members, finance and stewardship group, or the endowment committee? Anything that you'd like to emphasize that I didn't touch on? I just wanted to give a broad brush stroke to that thing. Okay. Any questions from anybody about that portion? I just wanted to sort of give that foundational understanding. Yes?
I'm just curious, because I'm newer to the church, and I'm just learning about the endowment fund from the survey. When it was originally established, did it have all these separate accounts, or were different accounts added as it went along?
Okay, great question. The question is, were these 7 accounts added? Were they established from the beginning, or were they added? My understanding is they were added along, but Talitha?
When initially the very first request was specifically for music. That was the one in 1983. But then it was just sort of general endowment after that, until we got a major request in 2015 that we divided in half. Half of it went into the endowment, 1.2 million at that point, and the other half went to building a new education wing. And it was at that point, Gail, that we developed the 7 different categories. And the idea behind the 4 designated fund categories, landscape maintenance, instrument maintenance, etc., the idea behind that was, let's make sure that we've got an ongoing support, financial support, for things that can go south really quickly if they don't get funded every year. So it makes sure that the grounds continue to be maintained, even if it's not a good stewardship year. It makes sure that we get the piano tuned and voiced and all of that, even if stewardship operating budgets are tight. Because those are things that churches can cut back on, and it then causes problems down the line. So that was the intent of, what are the things that we need to sustain that may not get, that are easy to get cut in an operating budget?
Mm-hmm. Right. And I take no offense in references to things going south. But in my book, that's sometimes a good thing. And we'll come back. I'm sure you'll have other questions. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Where are the endowment funds invested?
Frank, do you want to touch on that?
Sam, you'll do it. Sarah, you want, Sarah, or?
Sarah's coming up.
Yeah.
Oh, it's an offer, though.
Don't say that. That was a joke.
The endowment funds are invested in United Church funds. It's a balanced fund at this point, so it's 60% equities, 40% fixed income. Yeah.
Great. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So the Founded in Love, Building in Faith initiative that we're talking about here this morning is that way of watering and providing additional support into your current endowment to add that extra to ensure the sustainability over a period of years into the future. And so it's a focused initiative to raise some outright cash commitments over a period of the next 3 years toward a goal of eventually doubling your endowment, say from 1.5 to 3 million. would be wonderful additional support over a period of time. But we also recognize that this is also the opportunity not only to talk about infusing additional cash into the endowment, but to explain and help people understand a little more about the opportunities through what's called planned giving. Sometimes it's referred to as deferred giving, which people often do through wills, setting up trust, and other kinds of financial vehicles that can be end-of-life opportunities where it doesn't require someone to draw on outright cash currently. And so you'll be hearing more about this. We'll be talking, you'll see that some of the questions in the survey reference some of this as well. And so let's move into the survey, and here and again, I wanted you to see that from the beginning we surveyed 212 households. These were folks who had email addresses and were able to be contacted. 184 of those are local, and then 28 were out-of-town supporters, other constituents as well. And we had a return rate of 113 people actually responded out of the 212. That's 54%. And that is really, believe it or not, a good, very good response rate. Actually, when you look at online responses today, the statistics are anything from 5 up to 30% is considered really good. So you're at 54% of the people who received the survey. So that's very, very positive. And I remind you, this is really not quantitative. This is not percentages such that it's something you can make really good decisions on. It's qualitative. It's people's reactions just in general. It's a good barometer of how people in the congregation are feeling, what they're thinking, and will be helpful to guide church council, finance and stewardship committee, and the endowment committee in making future decisions. So one of the initial questions, how long have you been involved at United Church? Starting up at the 12 o'clock point and moving counterclockwise, you see that 17 people were involved 20 years or more, 20 people were involved 10 to 19 years, 47 people were 5 to 9 years. This is the newer influx of people coming into the congregation. 22 have only been here 2 to 4 years of these respondents, and then 7 people less than a year have been involved. What's your relationship with United Church? The dark blue, 77 of the 113 respondents are members. Then the other 18 in the orange there are frequent visitors, but not a formal member of United. And then you see the other portion there that make up the rest. There's some that were staff members, some that were former members, online participants, etc. I'm sorry, this one's hard to say. This is the age demographic. We're not talking about anybody in this room, but I'm going to say, look at where the larger part is. This is ages 71 to 80. Both the dark green on the back side, the back columns, is the age demographic of the membership and constituent groups of United, and then the lighter green are the respondents to the survey. So you see it pretty closely paralleled who the congregation is. Although, we'd always like to hear more from the 41 to 50 and 51 to 60. Those are the people who are very busy and probably engaged in so many other ways and may not have had an opportunity to participate in this survey. But in any case, just wanted you to see what the age demographic of United is and the response demographics as well, because that's going to help you see how some people responded, I think, if I were trying to read the tea leaves in there. How often do you participate in Sunday worship? 88 out of the 113 are here on Sundays. 15 periodically, and 10 people rarely as far as Sunday. But then when you ask, what about other times outside of Sunday and other participation? How often do you participate? 38 said often, so it goes from often of 88 down to 38, periodically 51, and rarely 23. So Sunday's involvement, and this goes with what we see in all denominations when we're doing similar kinds of survey. If you're more likely to be attending regularly on Sunday, you're going to be participating more highly in volunteering and doing other things with your church. It's not necessarily the other programs. Although, if I were to step out and start prognosticating, I'm going to be saying that what we're seeing now is that it's those other programs, those smaller groups I was talking about in the morning service, that are starting to help people feel more engaged and more connected, even outside of a Sunday service. So, what is your level of enthusiasm about the current programs and ministries? 37%, 42 people said very high enthusiasm. 54 said high. So that's 96 of the 113 have good feeling about the programs and ministries you're doing here. Okay, I'm going to jump to the last question that was on the survey, if any of you took it, but I think this is a good place to say, okay, what's the elephant in the room, Jerry? What's the one thing that nobody really talks about or we don't talk about enough that may need to be addressed? So out of the 113, we had 58 people who responded and wanted to talk about the elephant. Out of those 58, 9 actually said, there's really no issue. I think we talk about it all pretty clearly. But then 25 people said, what about leadership succession? What about the role of senior minister when that changes? So many people, people put comments about United is so identified with Talitha's ministry and leadership. What is that transition going to look like? When is that going to occur? And how are we planning for that? They're not saying Talitha leave tomorrow. Maybe 1 or 2. But really, it is about, and I'm seeing this in all organizations. I'm dealing with 3 other groups right now who have had executive directors or clergy leaders who have been in position for over 30-something years, and they are in their either mid to late 70s into their 80s, and their organizations do not have a plan for who's going to be next. And so that's, every organization needs to be thinking about how do we, it's not just who do we get next as far as our staff members, but it's all in all leadership roles. I even say in your committees and how you look at church council, how are you cultivating, nurturing, identifying, and growing leadership? That's going to strengthen you into the future. Increasing membership engagement, diversity of families, lack of younger members. That's all of us who are aging, as I think I brought out this morning too, we're looking for that younger generation, somebody who's going to come behind us. And so what does that look like for United? There's been personnel issues, staff turnover here. Over the years, 7 people brought that up. However, and we didn't do cross-tabulation on this, maybe that's some of the newer members, and they don't realize that you've had an office staff manager here for 10 years. You've had a director of your music program who's been here a substantial number of years, other positions as well. So there is continuity, but it's just sort of changes of the moment get people's attention. And of course you're struggling, just as all churches are, except for Wellesley, with youth programs, and what does that look like? But I even heard from them, it's a relatively small group, given where they live and the community they're in as well. So it's a challenge, and I'm not making excuses. And then there are a couple of you out there that want to get the mask off. And then there were a number of other sort of single issues, one-off sorts of things on this elephant in the room.
Definitely more people than that. They just didn't put it right.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But to reflect on this, I want you to see how positive people felt about the strengths of all the programs that you are doing. You've already seen that people were enthusiastic about the programs, But here was asking people to rate on a scale of 1 to 5 how they would rate these programs. And this is a weighted scoring. So it shows that, almost all of your programs are 4 or 4.5. All of these activities. So that's wonderful. Of course, where the weakness is, or what people saw as a challenge, is just what you've already named. Having enough young people, the children's ministry. Maybe what was interesting, looking at the adult faith formation, some people wanted better forums. So I'm apologizing for being with you today. I'm trying to keep it as engaging as possible. But really, what does that mean? Some people actually said, we have an older congregation. What are we doing really for that aging congregation in meaningful ways? I mean, that's what I was talking about, that yes, we worry about people who've left or who's going to come behind us, but what are we doing with the people who are here right now? And how do we engage and keep them served as well? What are your 2 top sources of information receiving? Communication is a challenge for every organization, but this was interesting to me because so many groups say, oh, we've got to move into social media, we've got to go electronic. Well, your greatest source is the monthly printed newsletter, followed by the Sunday worship bulletin, and then your weekly emails. Now that's electronic, but that's a print source as well for people. Sunday announcements, and I said sorry to Letha yesterday when we were talking about this. Keep the announcements succinct, but that's still a good source because you've got good attendance and people who are really engaged are coming on Sundays. But then look, web page, Facebook page, Instagram, not so much. Now, I will say the statistics of what we're seeing in other churches today is that we heard for years that now the baby boomers were all moving on to Facebook, but the millennials and Gen Xers and those younger generations were moving away from Facebook. They were all on Instagram. Well, here's what you're seeing from your age demographic. It's not that shocking to see this kind of a drop-off. But in any case, our recommendation to groups is always you have to communicate on multiple channels, it's called. So you've got to do print, you have to do some social media, and hope that somebody's going to read some of it, no matter how or where they may connect. Moving into a little talk about giving and stewardship, I asked the question about what is the rank of United Church in all of your philanthropic priorities? All of the charities, nonprofits that you may support, where does United rank? You see, 44 people say it's at the top of my list, 43 said it's near the top of my list, and 20 said it's at the middle, and then you had 4 people that said it's just one among many, and 2 people said it's not even on my list. No comment. But they care about United. And I think that's part of when we're talking about diversity, it's not just in financial support, it's in all ways. How do you engage people who want to do impactful things in this community to support the ministries and outreach of United? And then I've summarized a number of statistics about giving. 95% of that 113 respondents make a written pledge to United Church annually. That's incredible. You're doing a great job, stewardship, finance and stewardship team, of ensuring that people make a written pledge. And I know we have to say things over and over again in our churches everywhere, but to help your church leaders be good stewards of resources and good planners for the coming year. That's why these written pledges are so important. And acknowledging they can change. Things happen in all of our lives that may change our financial situations, but at least as an indication of how to support United in the future. So that's really strong. 77%, when asked, how do you go about deciding how much to give? 77% say, I have a specific amount in mind that I decide on. And I either give that specific amount weekly, monthly, or I'm going to write a one-time check annually. So it's a decision that they made. It's nothing that somebody calls on them and asks them to give. It's not something they've heard from the lectern, from some of the presenters. It's really something that's very personal that they decide to actually give. And this is interesting. Here and again, it's going to go against something I'm going to show you in just a little bit. It's not so much what you say about it or write about it, because a lot of people aren't even reading the printed material you have, but it's really what they perceive as the need that United is helping to address. Point to yourself. Just point to yourself. Yeah, I don't see anybody going, it's not what they think, it's about the heart. What do you perceive as that need that really moves you to give? Giving is really emotional. And therefore, while there's some bean counters, I'm sorry, I don't mean that, this is a negative. There are people who want to see the line items and the nuts and bolts of how a budget is put together. Much of giving, and especially in our churches, is about what moves people. And therefore, you have to tell stories. You have to show people how lives are being impacted and what you're doing that really makes a difference. And that's going to help to generate the resources that support the different programs and activities. That said, 91% of the people surveyed actually said, you do a good job here at United of explaining how the dollars are to be used, where they go, what the budget looks like when it comes to stewardship time. That's very encouraging and very strong. Now, related, we ask you to the endowment summary document. There was a 3-page document we ask you to read, and I know people may have skimmed through that on the survey or may not have read it in detail, but 70% of the respondents said it was extremely well presented or well presented. It was clear. Trying to keep it succinct so that people would read it, but it made good sense to most people. 84% believe that the endowment initiative we're talking about is at least somewhat important to the future of United Church, and 40% feel that this initiative is very important. It's that whole question about do you feel that the ministries and programs that United offer, is that important for the long-term future here in Santa Fe and around the world, for you being a witness to what a life-changing church can actually be and do? And yes, people are standing with you on that. 91% of the people responded are already familiar with what we call planned giving, or deferred giving, it's referenced sometime, but something related to later in life planning, what happens to your resources after you move on to the great beyond. And so people are fairly familiar with that, but there are still people who want more information. What is the likelihood that you would actually support this campaign at some level of giving? And you see here that there's I can't really read the small print, I apologize. High priority 18, medium priority 39, low priority 16. And then you do have people who say, yep, 22 of the folks, 20%, and another 4% or so. So almost a quarter of you people say, I need additional information, or I really need to think about this, or need to discuss this more. So that's, maybe a fourth of your congregation. This is where ongoing education, cultivation needs to be developed. Have you considered, in addition to what we're talking about, this initiative to raise some immediate cash, have you considered even a planned gift of some type to United Church? Interesting, there are 14 people who said we've already done it. There's another 20 who said, I'm interested in making this type of gift to United Church. Another 53 said, not now, but in the future, I might be interested. Those are the ones that want more information, more cultivation, and better understanding of what this means. And then there are 30 who said, I'm not interested in considering this type of gift. That's not unusual. The statistic in the United States today is that about 49% of people in the United States have actually made a will of some type. And out of that 49% who have made a will, only 19% have designated a portion of that to a nonprofit organization. It's because our groups just haven't really talked about it, or haven't made it easy, or haven't really informed people about the importance of doing that. You know, when I talk to churches or work with church groups, the easiest way is for you to think about, what you're currently giving on an annual basis to United, and think about what might I be able to do to endow this annual gift in perpetuity, into the future after I'm gone, because I care about the values of United Church and what it's doing. And so you figure a way of doing that on your own to enhance the ongoing ministry of work and of United, to ensure the sustainability of what you're doing. So that's the quick summary. Nobody's fallen asleep that I can see yet. So let's open it up for questions, either for me, sort of big picture, and then maybe if the endowment committee, finance and stewardship, or your church council members want to chime in on anything, glad to have them to help out as well. Any questions about anything that we've talked about today?
So,
Yes.
what's the intent of what to do with the elephant in the room questions?
Right. The church council will be seeing all of this and detail, and that's a part of just acknowledging that those are the big topics, and working on, I would say it's almost like a strategic plan. What over the next year, 2 years, 3 years will be done to begin addressing these. Questions or comments? Yes.
We want to increase the endowment. I understand about refilling thing, but is there a need? Are we running? I did look at the budget. That was like a month ago. I don't even remember it.
Sure.
Is there an immediate need to replenish? Is that interest not sufficient to fill the needs?
Maybe, Sam, you want to weigh in on that? That's a good question.
Well, Don, the need is,
Sam,
Yeah.
could you come up here a little mic?
sure.
Thank you.
Question is there a need for the immediate need? Well, the endowment funds, by plan, a portion of each year's operating budget. And last year, 2022, we needed to draw the greatest amount that we've ever done. We were, in a peculiar position because of circumstances that we all know.
Was that a bigger percentage?
We did not exceed our limit,
Okay.
but we did draw on previously unused but available funds. But the fact of the matter is, built into the elephant in the room questions are financial needs that the church will experience. Every church that needs to look for growth in its young members, for example, needs to staff for those and needs to find a way to program to bring those people in. We don't have all the answers to the questions that underlie that need, but that's there. And every church no church can have the same leadership forever. And so when the time comes, and none of us in the room here are in a hurry for that time to come, but when the time comes for leadership turnover, we have to realize that there's an associated loss of momentum in giving and in participation. And yet the building's needs and the church's program needs will continue. So we have to be prepared for that loss of momentum. And then finally, this will allow us to build into the community in ways that the church will find consistent with its calling, but maybe are not, in ways that are not yet on the program. I don't know if I've answered your question, but, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Not an emergency, but definitely a need.
That's right. Yes, sorry, in the back.
I have a question just out of curiosity, and I don't know if it's a council question, a legal question, or what, but I have only one ear, I guess. And one of the things that I toy with is the day I'm gone, if I were to give the church my home, and assuming that they would sell it and keep the profits, is that something worth thinking about? Am I giving the church more to worry about or more problems than it's worth?
Never. Thank you for being willing to share that. I really appreciate that, because that's an example of the kinds of thinking that individuals can do about other ways that they can give in some kind. That's a planned gift, essentially. So it's not just dealing with dollars and cents. There are other opportunities. You know, I often cringe when I hear on NPR another advertisement. I think NPR stopped this, but it's some other organizations about give us your old car. Now that's a headache because they have to deal with trying to get it to auction and selling off whatever that, and you know, all of that. But a home or some real estate, other kinds of accumulated assets like that are really an opportunity for that to occur, and legal
actually,
and financial.
Actually, we do have a gift acceptance policy that would allow us to accept a home.
That's right.
So,
Right.
and we have to do some things, you know, to make sure that it meets all of the requirements that we would have, but we do have a policy that allows that acceptance.
So if it were like a deed upon death or in a will,
Yes,
those
right,
cover the bases?
Yeah.
Right.
that would be covered.
Okay, Frank.
Couple things. I want to let you guys know that you can put your trust in two people, that lady right there and Sam. If you want to know numbers, don't talk to me. Talk to these people. For you guys who are in the nuts and bolts of this stuff, these are the people to do, and we're very blessed to have. And Sarah has been here forever, right? But one thing, Donna, something you said too. This isn't an emergency, but it's a need. The reason it's not an emergency because people like you, somewhere in the past, said, I want to do this. And we wouldn't have Elijah back here. We wouldn't have the new AC, we don't have air conditioning in Santa Fe. We do in our house. We wouldn't have that stuff. And we have experienced something that in my lifetime I've never experienced. We've experienced the COVID thing, okay? And the cool part, if there's a cool part about this, all those people behind us, because of what they did, we sailed through this thing. Karen and I have friends who are pastors of churches, several churches. They ain't singing they're not saying what we're saying. And I'm not one to talk about money in church because I don't have any, but I mean, it's just, because of what some people did prior to us and had the forethought to do this, that's why we're here and why we're able to do what we're to do. And I'll keep saying this, I guess. I had no intention of becoming part of a church when we moved here. Jerry and I have similar philosophies about the Methodist Church, which is what I didn't grow up in, but that's Karen and I were married one. And this church, we walked the walk, folks. We fed people during COVID. Enough said. I don't mean to get emotional, but this is why you guys here. It's a song called "Open My Eyes." It's an old praise song. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord.
Yeah.
Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes. I want to see, feel. So anyway, so great question, and I'm glad you brought it up because it. So I'll shut up.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, no other questions. I'll just say thank you all again very much. We'll continue working with your leadership here to move things forward and be available to help answer questions. But you have incredible leadership here, as you can see, and the wonderful work that you're all doing is important work in this old world in which we live. And so thank you for all that you at United Church are doing and will continue to do well into the future. So thank you for being here for us today.